welcome once again to Let's Talk Marriage. This is Pastor Larry coming to you this afternoon, this Wednesday afternoon, saying, asking you, let's talk marriage. All right, let's talk about it. All right. Hope everyone is doing well. If you woke up this morning, you are doing well. We're going to get right on into our subject today. Our subject today is how did you recover from an argument that you had with your spouse? There's a lot of things that goes on within a marriage. And I always say it's not hard. We make it hard. But there's a lot of questions that has to be answered when you have a discussion. Let's just say that, put it as a discussion. Don't be telling me what to do. When you get to the point where you're always arguing, if you are always arguing with your spouse, you can't have a normal conversation without it escalating into an argument. Maybe there's something you need to sit down and try and talk about it. But by all means, don't talk about it while you're in the midst of the argument. In other words, while you're in the midst of the argument, you don't want to talk. That's why you don't want to talk. Well, you don't want to listen. You don't say anything. Come on, people, make some sense. What you do is you have to make sure that each person is calmed down. And that if you're spiritual people, make sure that you pray about it when you have a serious pray before you have a serious conversation with your spouse. Because there's some conversations that are not easy, but you have to figure out a way to ask them. It's the same thing with a pastor. He can't just come out and say things just because he's a pastor. Or just because you're the husband, you just can't come out and say things. You have to figure out a way to say things. There's a right way to say things and there's a wrong way to say things. Even though you might be right, doesn't mean it's the right time to say what you have to say. You have to make sure it is said at the right time. And when you're trying to have a serious conversation about something that's bothering you or something that's troubling you in your marriage, you have to figure out a time and a place to say it. Take her out to dinner and try to stay calm when you have something serious to ask your spouse. Because things can really escalate, and before you know it, she talking about your mama. You want to talk about my mama? Oh no, you don't want to go there. Make sure that we are having normal conversations with our spouse, or the thing to do is to practice having regular conversations, so that when a serious conversation come along, it won't be as hard to talk, because you can talk as it is. But if you guys are always separated, or one person in another room, there's a time you do that. But then you should always have a time where you come together and spend time together and just have general talk. There's nothing wrong with general talking, about the relatives and funny things that happen in your life. Always talk about good things. Don't bring up bad things. If there's something that's bothering you, figure out a way to say it to your spouse. Don't just say anything. You have people that just have no filter. Make sure you have a filter, because if you have no filter, what's going to happen is that arguments are going to start, and then somebody's going to be sleeping on the couch. Or somebody's going to be sleeping. Well, nowadays, somebody's going to be sleeping in the other room, the guest room. Guess what? You in there. So make sure that we are having these conversations with our spouse, and make sure that you are telling your spouse that you love her. You get to the point where you tell you love her so much where she's like, what are you up to? So that way when you're telling them that you love them, that it's not really a surprise, but they know that you love them. They get the idea that you love them. Because some people feel, in a marriage, they might feel even lonely in a marriage. And they might feel trapped, but that's why you have to spend some time with your wife and make sure you're complimenting her. There's some people that never compliment their wives. Like, how could you not compliment your wife? I mean, you married, it's your wife. Nobody else don't want her. or your husband. Make sure you compliment your husband. Even the ones that try to do things around the house and tab something. See, I told my dad, said, you don't know how to do nothing. No, you don't do that. I said, well, just say, well, maybe we'll get it, we'll do a better job next time, or, you know, don't try to belittle each other. You know, that's another thing. Don't belittle each other. Make sure we are supporting each other. Make sure that we are loving on each other. Make sure we get that ultimate support for each other. And try to stay away from those arguments. Oh my goodness. You know, there's nothing worse than being in public and you see a couple arguing. You can always tell they're married by the way they look. There's something about marriage. Because you know when folks are seeing each other, they tend to carry themselves differently. You know, they make sure they have on the best outfit. They make sure they have on the best, you know, cologne, and their hair is did, and you can tell that they're on they're seeing each other, or they're on a date. They're out with each other, and they're loving on each other. They're holding hands and stuff. But then when you see a married couple, if they've been married a while, you'll see the man walking all off, or the woman walking on off, and they both looking tacky. That's how you can tell. But another way you can tell too is when you hear their conversation. They'll be arguing over the dumbest things. Now, I told you I didn't want nothing red, and you trying to make me get something red. I don't want no red. Trying to make me a Jezebel. I ain't putting that stuff on my face. You just leave it. It's just going on and on and on. You're like, okay. And then, they have the kids with them, and they're yelling at the kids, but my parents never had to yell at me when we went in public, because before we left out of the house, she told us what to do, how to act in the store. Don't ask for nothing. Maybe you should have that with your spouses. When you get to that store, baby, don't ask for nothing, because we ain't got no money. Right? No, I don't think you should do that, because you might not make it out the door. All right. And when the kids are at the malls, and their parents, or at the store with their parents, you can always tell how long they've been married by the size of the kids, and by the way conversation they have between their husband and wife. But make sure that we are having good conversation. Make sure that we are, especially if we're Christians, make sure we are setting an example for other married couples. Don't go nowhere rolling your eyes at each other and stuff. Didn't I tell you, I'm going to get you, sucker? What are you doing? Get some sense. We have these arguments, and then sometimes you go to church and you can't get into the service because you just had an argument, and you want to get spiritual, you want to pray, you want the Lord to hear your prayers, but you can't because you've been in an argument, or just gotten into an argument and a heated discussion with your spouse before you get left out the door. You almost stayed home. Well, come on, people. We have to learn to stop doing things like that. Learn to communicate, and that's where a lot of these issues come in at, because people don't communicate like they should. They all stand off. Don't stand off. Make sure you're communicating with each other and loving them. Make sure you're telling your spouse that you love her every day. Don't let a day go by where you don't tell your spouse that you love them. And show them some love too. Don't just tell them. Show them some love. If the wife has been looking at something and she desires to have something, make sure she gets it. I try to make sure my wife get anything that she looking at, or if she says, I don't think I don't need another. Well, let's just go ahead and get it. And it makes for a good conversation when you can talk about the things that you've done together, the good things. Make sure you talk about, bring up all the good things. We like to bring up all the issues and the problems that we have. I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this no more. I ain't gonna have this. We're not gonna have this discussion no more. And when you never really had the discussion to begin with, you had an argument. That's not a discussion. That's an argument. And you don't want to have those, because when you have arguments, again, they can escalate to something else. And that's where a number one reason for people getting divorced. It's usually because they can't get along, they can't communicate with each other, and they have arguments, and they don't want to go and see someone, they don't want to talk to no one, third party, which would be someone that's a professional, a therapist or a family counselor. Again, I always say that if you can't get along with each other, maybe you need to seek a family counselor and seek prayer. First of all, you pray about it before you open up with these conversations. Make sure you especially the serious conversations, make sure you talk to the Lord before you have these serious conversations, so they won't escalate into arguments. And there's so many people out here that are suffering, they've suffered through trauma, and they've had bad breakups, bad relationships with no closure. Make sure you have closure on your old relationships. Close those out. That's a different chapter. Close that chapter out and start a new chapter with your spouse. And, if you want to become a loving couple, you weren't always a loving couple, but now you want to go to a different level where, you both are loving on each other. Make sure you do so. That the step toward that is communicating. When you communicate with your spouse, make sure they know what's on your heart, what's in your mind. You're not going to tell everything, but make sure you tell the things that are going to benefit your marriage also. And make sure you are in a church. Let me tell you, make sure you are in a church where you can see examples on how to be married, how to react in certain situations. Make sure you're in a church where they teach you, where you can be taught and learn things. Make sure your children are there with you also. Make sure we are teaching our children. Nowadays you see children that are just running wild. Make sure that we are teaching our children. Make sure they see an example in us as a married couple. Make sure our children see that, so they won't think that, oh, I ain't never getting married. See how they treat each other? They want to say, oh, I want to find someone that's loving, just like I see mom and dad react toward each other. I want to find someone that's just like them, that has those same characteristics. So make sure that we are loving on each other. Make sure that we are showing love. Make sure we are attending some church together as a couple, because having that spiritual background can go a long ways, and it will help you. I'm telling you, it's going to help you. And if you need more than that spiritual background or that spiritual help, make sure you get that also with family counseling. And when you have family counseling, you can go a long ways. You can mend a broken marriage if you just communicate. This is Pastor Larry telling you to communicate. That's the key word this week. Communicate with your spouse, communicate with your children, communicate with your co-workers, because a lot of things can get done when you communicate. That's the whole thing with Jesus and the disciples. He communicated with them while he was teaching them. He communicated with them, and they understood. They didn't understand at first, but after a while, they understood what he was all about. And that's how they were able to spread the gospel of Jesus. This is Pastor Larry. I'm going to be signing off until we meet again with Let's Talk Marriage. All right. Let's Talk Marriage. This is Pastor Larry. We will see you when we see you. God bless you.